Hey guys, welcome to Mix Wednesday 4. Here inside of our Any Meeting group with Ryan John and Kenny Goshgarian.
Hey guys.
So we're looking at this track that we looked at last week, and Ryan, he did some mix prep with this thing, and we want to take a look at the low end and the general bass processing of this song. So Ryan, why don't you take it away for us?
Yeah. So this is kind of where we ended mix prep last week. Except this is my mix prep file as opposed to the one that Kenny and Dan built with you guys. A couple little differences, but none of them are really too relevant. They're all kind of personal things. So you guys have all heard the song then, and if you haven't, the link to downloading this same session should be online, and I'm sure we'll link it in this video. But if we're talking about going through this bass here, there's some pretty basic steps to do. I always start with
boy.
So good. Right? I know, right? We're getting into the dumb puns.
Yep.
All right, so I always start with a high pass on every channel. I mean, I think you guys went through this last week, but on the bass itself, if you take a listen to what this bass is doing and ride that high pass up, it seems to sit around, what is that, 60 and change?
Yep.
Before it really starts to take away the body of the bass. If you want to hit play, you can actually let that roll just so you can hear without it and with it. So it doesn't really take away anything from the bass.
Yep.
But it does clean up some rumble and stuff. If you're looking at a meter after this, you can definitely see that some of the stuff in the wasteful bottom end has gone away.
Great. So you typically do this as more. Ryan, you typically go through these tracks and you'll apply this high pass filtering thing to everything inside of your mix prep, and you do that to kind of reduce just what unwanted sounds, more of a corrective use, not a creative use at this point, right?
At this point, it's simply corrective, and it just gets rid of some of the inaudible crap that's in the low end, but the crap that's in the low end takes up a lot of energy. So if you let that build up across, 40, 100, 200 tracks, you lose a lot of headroom over stuff you can't even hear.
Yeah, because, I mean, yeah, that's the thing about this stuff. It's all subtle differences, what I've found. So if you have a low rumble at maybe 3 decibels of a low rumble across like 10 different tracks, that all adds up. And then it just starts to really get in the way. So that's really awesome.
All of a sudden you realize you're clipping your limiter or you're clipping your outputs, but you're not actually very loud.
Gotcha. Well, that's a pretty clever way of doing it. I mean, just completely looking at it from a corrective standpoint, not even completely ignoring the idea of using it as a creative thing right now. So
right.
Yeah, killer.
I mean, I always start with it there. And then as you kind of progress through the mix, you might move it up because you don't sonically need whatever's happening down there in the bottom end. Maybe you want to move the tone of the whole thing up a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is a starting point, is simply to allow me to start with a, more useful source.
Yeah. Great.
Anyway, so this is, kind of a bluesy song. Touch of rock and roll to it, especially when the guitars kind of come in and start doing their solo stuff.
Yep.
So whenever I've got guitar stuff that starts going into lead territory and leaving rhythm territory, I like doing the overdrive bass track as well. So it kind of fills in the space between where bass is, which is down here, and guitar, which is up here. This empty spot right in between, I like to fill in that space. I mean, I actually like to fill in that space always.
Yeah.
But that's because I like rock and roll.
Cool.
So realistically, what I do, well, there's a couple ways to do it. You can either bus this bass to a bus and make 2 different returns for it, one of them being clean, one of them being an overdrive, or you can just duplicate the track. Sometimes I actually just prefer to duplicate the track because I might end up editing out a lot of finger noise and things like that on the overdrive track. Yeah. So let's try doing that. We'll start with an overdrive duplicate.
Sweet. So yeah, this is some of the workflow that Kenny did last week. I don't think we actually touched on specifically bass processing. So again, what we're doing is we're simply just duplicating the track and going to apply another round of effects on it. So I'm just going to take out the sends and the inserts. Actually, do you want me to leave the inserts in, Ryan?
Leave the insert, but get rid of the sends.
Gotcha. Alrighty. So we got that bass processing track duplicated right in here.
Cool.
And then you reach for the Sans amp, or what do you reach for?
I reach for the Sans amp, and ultimately I'm probably even going to push that one band up even higher.
Okay, so we'll take the Sans amp, throw it in there.
Let's skip a slot though. Let's move down by one slot, so we've got an empty space above it.
Okay, like that.
No, put the one band right at the start again.
Sorry.
That is kind of corrective and clean up. That's always going to be there, you know.
Gotcha. Very cool.
So the Sans amp, I mean, basically, again, the idea here is to bring the bass halfway between where the guitar is and where the bass is.
I see.
The Sans amp is really, really good for this, but also it can get a little bit out of control. But also you can have some absurd fun with it. So my starting point for the Sans amp is with the low maxed out and the high maxed out.
With the, say that again?
The low knob on it, max it out. The high knob on it, max it out.
Alrighty.
Let's unsolo the clean bass for a minute and take a listen to this.
Okay.
Oh, I want way more drive than that. Let's push the drive a little.
So now we're like clipping territory.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of control there as well, so you got to pull that back.
Something like that.
Oh, I go even more distorted than that.
All right, we'll just crank up the drive.
All right, cool. Let's stop there for a second. You know how I said leave an empty slot in between?
Yep.
That's because we're going to put an API 550B in there, and we're going to push it into the Sans amp even harder.
All right, cool. Well, considering I'm not currently on the 550B, let's go ahead and
let's see what you got.
let's go ahead and reach for the we can reach for the Fab Filter Pro Q.
Sure. I just want lots of harmonically rich stuff going on.
Cool. Yep. Alrighty. And what do you want to do with this guy?
Somewhere between 125 and 25. We're just going to boost a ton of it.
125 and 25?
Yeah. Like 1.25K.
125K.
1.5K. Not
sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Okay. When I say boost a ton, I mean 6 dB plus.
Alrighty.
Listen to what that sounds like. Listen to how it distorts. Hopefully it distorts in a lovely way.
All right.
Probably push the gain on that a little bit more too.
All right.
There you go. Cool. Let's stop there. That sounds great. It sounds really crunchy and big and aggressive and annoying.
Yeah.
So after that Sans amp, I'll put something like an LA2, either the LA2 or an LA2 clone, and let it push it back as well and let it really crush it dynamically. The CLA2 is fantastic.
Cool. So in here, you pretty much just throw the peak reduction all the way down?
Somewhere around 70.
Alrighty. Right about there. And you do anything with the screw in here, or you just leave it where it is?
But I always turn analog off on this one. I don't know why. It just, whatever. It's less noisy.
Yep. And what about limit? You keep this thing on compress or limit?
It depends. It depends on the playing. This one's actually pretty mellow bass playing, so you could probably do compress. If there's slap stuff going on, sometimes limit helps you out a little bit more.
Cool. Very cool. And then let's take a listen.
That sounds pretty gritty and pretty smooth, though.
Yeah.
So let's pull this fader all the way down. Let's solo up the clean bass as well, and then we'll start bringing this up to see what they do together.
All right. I'll just stop this processing. We'll start over here. What do you think about that?
I think it sounds great. What's nice about having this on a separate track is that you don't need to leave it on all the time. Yep. So when you hit a verse, you can have the bass be very clean and, you know, kind of smooth, a little less aggressive. Then when you hit chorus or the guitar solo a bit, you can let the aggressiveness of the bass cut through. In fact, when the whole mix is going, in fact, if you unsolo it now, you can probably hear it. When the whole mix is going, you can push this distorted bass a lot hotter than you think you should be able to when it's soloed. And it'll still fit really well, and it'll still, you know, have some smoothness to it. Give it a shot. Hit play. Push up. Get it out and see what it sounds like without it.
Alrighty. Maybe kick it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with some friends of mine down in Hollywood.
Yeah, that's pretty killer the way that sounds.
It kind of brings up where the harmonics of it really are, so that it's a little higher range. So on my laptop, I can hear bass pretty clearly once you start doing that. Whereas prior, bass is there, but it's not very easy to tell the notes that are being played.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So are we? So technically, we're adding a lot of harmonic distortion to this bass using the Sans amp, and then we're just crushing it with this LA2A. And what I'm noticing is that we're actually getting more of a smoother response out of this bass when it's applied to the entire mix. It's coming through a little bit clearer, and it's actually a little bit smoother too, which is really interesting.
Right. Well, that's what the LA2 is doing after the Sans amp. Without that, it's a little gritty, and the dynamics of the playing really start standing out in sometimes an annoying way. If someone hits really hard, all of a sudden it's just really in your face. But the LA2 is really pulling it back to a place where it's controlled.
Yeah, cool. So if you guys can see that, what we're doing is we've got the filter on the very first slot there. We threw in the Sans amp. You can check out the settings right there. Pretty much just got drive kicked up, low kicked up, high kicked up, and that's about all we did to that. And then to get more graininess out of there, I just threw up the Pro Q. I think EQ will work. Actually, I think Ryan favorites the API 550B, and that one. But yeah, kick up the about what's he said 1.25K right in there, and then just throw in the LA2A and crush it. So yeah, that's a pretty nifty little trick there for bass processing. Oh, and then we kind of wrote it in very slightly, kind of like you would with a parallel compression technique.
Right.
Very cool.
And then let's say we wanted yet another bass sound during a different part of the song. See, that's the other thing, is that using different sounds for different sections of songs is what creates movement.
Gotcha.
So whilst it may not be wholly appropriate for this song, let's do another duplicate of this, and let's go through a different bass sound that we could use on a track.
Cool.
Let's not copy, or we'll not copy plugins, and we won't copy sends.
All right, cool. So I'll just basically duplicate this track, but without the inserts.
Yep.
Very cool.
Exactly.
Alrighty.
All right. So this time we're going to put, I think, a 4-band EQ. That one will allow you to do a high pass and a low pass, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So let's toss a 4-band on. Let's set the high pass somewhere around 40 at a very steep shelf.
Alrighty.
Or not shelf, at a very steep. That's a shelf, buddy. I need a high pass. Different things. Yeah. There you go. Cool.
We'll set it around 40.
Yep. Cool. And then we're going to put a low pass, and we're going to pull it down to about 90, 100, somewhere around there.
So you want to do? Wait, we're going to put a high pass right around 90 to 100. Is that what you just said?
Low pass around 90 to 100. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, he's doing some crazy stuff.
The crossover on that's a little funky, but maybe we can go a little bit higher than that. Let's bump it up a touch. Okay. But again, it doesn't matter what this looks like. It really should just be what it sounds like. So I should stop looking.
Yeah.
why not bump that up a tiny bit?
All right. Here's a cool feature about the Pro Q. You can grab both nodes and move them together. It's pretty sweet. So where do you want to throw that?
Let's have the high pass end at like 110. Or sorry, the low pass sit at 110-ish.
Okay.
And then we'll bring the high pass back down to 40. The high pass should stay at 40-ish.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So this will be back at we'll bring this to about 40.
Cool. That's close. All right. Cool. So what we're looking at here, functionally, is all the sub content of this bass guitar. Okay. Because there realistically is nothing under 40, and above 110 or so is what I consider harmonics that are, I mean, not officially, because like an E is 120 or something hertz.
Yeah.
But the rest of it I consider, you know, the non-sub content of bass. So if you've got a subwoofer going on in your car, this is the region of the bass guitar that you're going to hear it on.
Interesting.
So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this and we are going to limit the snot out of it. So that functionally what we're trying to do is to create a sub bass on a single fader, if that makes sense. It's almost like having a Moog fatty from a live bass on one fader.
Crazy. Cool.
So you have a consistent low end and you can ride it up and down however you so desire.
Very cool.
So crush the living dog piss out of it.
That's what I was saying.
Very cool. I could just throw Maxim on here, or we can throw on the CLA2A if you want to do that.
Well, the CLA2A is going to start creating harmonics, which could be good, could be bad. I don't really know, and I'm not really going to be able to hear it through this laptop very well. But let's just start with that.
All right. Very cool.
This is actually where it gets interesting. If you've got something like Waves Bass Rider or Vocal Rider or one of those two, you could put that before the limiter so that the inputs going into the limiter are more consistent. Then you just toss the limiter on it so that it's just holding it together as opposed to starting to add weird harmonic content and things like that.
Wow. Very cool.
All right. So at this point, hit play, pull down the threshold till you feel like you're getting a very consistent subby bass level.
All right. There we go. Sounds about right.
Okay, cool. And it sounds controlled and consistent.
What was that?
It sounds controlled and consistent.
Let's take another listen. Yeah, every note is coming through pretty clearly, and it's not. There's no weird drop-offs or anything until it's actually stopped. The bassist has actually stopped playing. Okay,
cool. So again, since this is kind of a very particular tonal region we're going for here.
Yep.
I'm glad you left an open slot in between the Pro Q there and Maxim, because it can be very helpful to toss an expander gate in that slot.
Oh, very cool.
So that we clean up and make the low end even tighter out of what we've got going here.
Okay. Well, I'll just stick to some Avid plugins.
Yeah, now. Honestly, I actually only use that expander gate. I don't use anything else.
Oh, great.
So
cool.
You can, attack is okay. Release is probably okay. Holds, actually, all those are kind of okay. Just get it so that it opens when it's being played and closes when it's not. You don't need a fast attack. You can make this a little unnatural. Again, remember, we're kind of going for a sub-synth type sound here.
Like this?
Yep. So, where you're at now is you've got control of the sub-content of your bass.
Gotcha. Okay.
What usually becomes an interesting spot is, let's say you hit the bridge of a song and you want it to be bigger than whatever came before it. A really good way to do it is to toss this in now, which you didn't have before. And you don't necessarily need the distorted one anymore, because when you've got sub content on one fader and you've got the natural bass on another, and then you've got the overdrive in the middle here, you can do the natural one for just the verses. You can do natural plus overdrive for the choruses, so you get bigger. Then you can do just natural plus sub content for the bridge. So you have a different kind of size. You know, it's not larger, it's not smaller, but it's a different kind of size. Now you've got all this bottom end that comes in. And then when you hit the last chorus, you can throw all three of them in, so that it's even bigger than it's ever been.
Wow. So what we're doing is we're just creating a bunch of different ways, parallel processing, to get the song to move in the low end, essentially.
Right. And then the other thing, the point of note here is, which we haven't actually spoken about, all of these are routed to a bass all group.
Yep, that's true.
And that's relevant because if we start doing stuff with the tone of the bass using these three faders, we still need it all to show up in one fader so you can control the overall bass of everything.
I see. Yeah, so if you guys can see inside the Pro Tools session here, we've got our bass 1, 2, 3 routed to this bass all track right here. And then this is a room and a chorus that Ryan has currently muted in his session. We won't get in, we may or may not get into that, but the routing these three are getting right into here. What's that?
We can talk about that right now, actually.
Wonderful. Let's do it.
So in the case that we've got a reasonably bare chorus, which this song kind of has too. It's a repeated vocal line over basically the same arrangement as what's going on before it and after it. So it doesn't really change too much. This is why we're doing these duplicate bass tracks, is because then we can force change into it, so when it hits the chorus, tonally things move forward.
Yep.
When we hit that chorus, the mix doesn't really get wider, doesn't really get bigger. So I put a bass chorusing effect and a bass reverb effect, both of which are stereo effects.
Wonderful.
This way, when we hit the chorus, we can unmute that bass reverb. If you want to listen to it and then hit mute on that bass room, you should be able to hear it go from this wide, dead center mono, to at least a little bit wider, just because of the amount of stuff going on room reverb wise.
Very cool.
You want to listen to that real quick? You can probably mute up the sub and mute up the overdrive bass there.
Got it. Here we go. So I'll just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solo out this, go to the pre-chorus, and we'll just listen to this track right here.
So yeah, start with the bass room muted, and then bring it in after.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Check it out.
So it's just a tiny bit of width that's added in there.
Yep.
And it's exactly the same for the bass chorus. If you look at the bass chorus settings, it's on pitch. I think it's on -12 and +12 for the left and right.
That's correct.
-12 cents, +12 cents. You can do the same thing for that. Just mute it out, hit play, unmute it, etc. You know, see what it's doing.
Very cool. Here we go. You can hear how it takes it away.
Yep.
So if I'm not mistaken, what you're doing with this this Pitch It plugin, this Pitch 2 plugin, is that you're basically just putting it on a stereo track, sending the bass to it, and then you're just detuning the left and right sides to kind of open up the stereo image of this bass track, right? It's kind of what's going on.
Basically exactly that. It's kind of like, I mean, it's functionally like having a chorus effect, except it's not moving. It's just sitting at those pitches.
Yep.
When you listen to it, what it does is it just gives it a stereo spread. You bump it down to mono, it's not really phasing out or anything like that. It actually still kind of collapses in a pretty decent way. And again, these all route to the bass group. So if you turn on all this stuff right now, it's still going to the bass group. And if you want, you can just put a limiter on the bass group and have that control the whole thing. So even though technically the level should have gone up with all this stuff on, you can still have it capped out and controlled.
That's really cool. And you could use this effect in the opposite direction too. Like if you wanted to just all of a sudden have the center, just the center be the focus, like the bass actually sum to the center in a song. It would be used the exact same way, but in the opposite way. So I mean that's pretty cool. So what we're doing here is we're providing ourselves with many different options to throw your bass track and process it throughout a mix. And in the end, your track is still the same bass line, but we're just adding subtle differences to it to get kind of move and sound better. So that's really cool.
And again, it's the movement of the bass track that keeps it interesting. Otherwise, it's just a single riff for most of the song. It doesn't really change too much as the song progresses. So what we're doing is we're creating a movement. We're making sure that when it hits the chorus, it's got these extra tonal options that we can toss in. When it hits the bridge, it's got another tonal option. So even throughout, you still have the original bass in there. In fact, you don't even need that. You could hit a spot where you only go to the sub bass and you mute out the original bass. But as of right now, you've got a lot of control tonally as to what you can do with this. You can really just do anything. We've got 3 different bass sound options here, and the blend of any of them are, pretty cool. And again, I used pretty much stock plugins here because I wanted everyone to be able to just use whatever they want. Also, point of note, there's an EQ7 band after that reverb on the bass room there. Something that people do not do enough is EQ the return of their reverb. I know that a lot of dudes just go through EQ presets and they just bump through next one, next one, next one, next one, next one until they find one that's right. Most of those presets have exactly the same reverb detail. It's just the EQ after it that's changed. Don't be afraid to just toss an EQ after reverb. If you're like, the decay of this sounds awesome, but it's very low, mid, heavy, just put an EQ after it and clean it up and see what it does. Most of the time, it's going to work pretty well.
Very cool.
So that's kind of the bass for me, honestly.
That's awesome.
That's pretty awesome.
Very cool. Want to put that into action? Like, so I had a quick question. I'm assuming that most of the time you just automate the mute and unmute per section, correct?
You can do that, yeah.
Is there any times where you do it more like volume wise?
Yeah, it's all dependent on the song. If there's a build that's kind of awesome, maybe like a build that goes to a break and then the drop for like a bridge or a chorus or something, you might just take all 3 of them and just ride them up into the break, and then obviously mute them out for the break, and then just let them all hit on the out. Yeah, you can create a lot of movement by having them on separate faders.
Yeah, I like that. I never the bass chorus thing is new to me, and honestly, I never usually put my bass in any kind of room unless I think that the song absolutely needs it. But it's going to have that option there just for spacing and kind of.
Also, take a look at that reverb setting. Look at how short it is. It should be, what, 900 milliseconds or so is the decay? It might even be even shorter than that.
So we've got...
okay, I'm full of shit.
146.
146, nowhere near 900. But since you've got the EQ after it, you don't have to worry about it futzing with your low end and making your low end not tight. Yeah. Realistically, what you could do in that EQ is, I mean, you already have a high pass on what's getting sent to it, but reverbs make sound, etc. It might make it a little bit messier. On that 7-band EQ after it, you can just high pass it again at, like, I don't know, 200. Because you don't really need anything lower than that in terms of the width. The width is going to be from the upper mid-range part of the sound. So, yeah, you can bump that up to some 12 dB an octave and just get up into the 200 range.
There you go.
And that'll probably, you know, keep your low mids nice and tight, but it might give you a little bit of air and width when you hit some chorus.
Would you ever also, like, put sends on the amped or distorted bass or the chorusy bass that you made?
Absolutely. Well, I might not do it on the sub bass because the sub bass could just get weird. Things like room reverbs and choruses that could get funky. Sub content, you got to be pretty particular about, very controlled. So
Okay.
that one, I never do it. But the overdrive one, yeah, you can absolutely send that to stuff.
Just kind of as an option.
Yeah, it's another option.
Very cool.
So that's
Very cool.
bass right there.
Bass processing 101 with Ryan John.
Yeah, it's more like bass processing like 701.
Very cool.
Way more complicated than your usual.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Well, hey, thanks guys for taking a look at the snippet of Mix Wednesday 4. We're gonna shoot some more, and we'll get right back to you.